Hey, how's it going? Nice to see you again. My name is Cherry Cheeks, and today we are gonna be doing a tutorial. I made this recent Oscar the Grouch outfit for Burlesque Hall of Fame in June 2024. Today I will be showing you a bit of the behind the scenes of how I made my Oscar the Grouch hat, which is inspired by a trash can. This hat is quite simple. You will see all I really used is fabric. I have this awesome wreath template frame, which is the base of the hat. I personally like to use beading thread because I find it is sturdier than just using regular thread. It's a lot easier to string and put through the needle. I just happened to be in a dollar store and I just happened to find this wreath frame, which was perfect for what I was trying to do with this hat. I personally try to create costumes and props and pieces that I can travel well with, which means they are durable. Before I began, I really was trying to make sure I did actually have enough fabric for my hat. Basically, you can see me here kind of outlining how I was thinking about possibly lining the hat so that it would fit on my head. Because there was the little piece in the middle, I kind of was thinking it would be good to have a little bit more loose fabric in that section so it could fit a little bit better on my head rather than just like sitting too flat. So I kind of played around a bit to make sure that worked, experimented with what I thought might work for sewing it. And you will also see me throughout this video experimenting quite a few times. That's kind of the process for me, is I tend to have a plan, but really my actual execution tends to be very different than the plan itself. So I tend to have pretty organic processes after I start the construction of my costumes, just to see what works as the costume continues to develop. So I find working with fabric, and in particular working with fabric that is with a really hard solid base, such as this wreath frame, I find often your fabric can shift and it doesn't always end up how you want it to as you sew it. So one of the things I did to make sure that really that doesn't happen, or I can minimize how much that happens while I'm sewing my fabric onto my hat, was I decided to really start with 4 corners of the circle, or 4 spots in the circle, to really kind of pin down my fabric in the beginning. Everything else, if it shifts, it wouldn't shift nearly as much because it's being held down in these 4 sections. You can see I'm kind of tying a little knot. I like to double knot my points whenever I have to put a knot in fabric. Instead of tying a regular knot with the thread, you put your needle through the fabric, put your thread around the needle, and then pull it. And that way your thread will be nice and tight and easy to make it flush with the fabric. And then you do a second one to solidify it in place. Once I had my 4 spots kind of tacked down, that was when I started to actually sew the fabric directly to my headpiece. I'm just kind of doing a simple thread over top of the wire and then underneath. And you'll also notice that one thing I used to really help make this so much easier than it would have been if I used a regular needle was I actually used a needle that is specifically made for hemming fabrics and sails. Basically, it's a needle that's in a U shape, so it's a lot easier to work with bending around really awkward shapes like wire or really hard frames when you have limited space and you can't just go directly through the fabric and then pull back up. And you'll also notice one thing I did to help me solidify the fabric down as well, in addition to tacking it down with the knots in the 4 corners in the beginning. Anytime I went over one of those kind of crosses or intersections of wire, just because then that way it was a nice way to make sure the fabric again didn't shift sideways after the hat was made as well. And so there you can see it's kind of a little bit wonky at the moment, but you can kind of get the idea of what I was going for with the hat, of having a spot for my head to go through in the middle. So once I did that, I decided to start with the top of the hat, so what's going to be not touching my head, and pin that down. And then later I did the underside, so then I can hide any kind of inconsistencies or mistakes or anything that's not as pretty. Then it was just slowly, over time of many hours, sewing around again and really pulling the fabric tight or taut so that it would look smooth on top by the time I finished my sewing. And again, you'll probably notice that I flip this over quite a few times to check how my progress is going as I go. I have made a lot of mistakes in the past where I have learned now to not just go for it and finish an entire costume piece all in one go without checking it and then test how it fits me or test how it looks at the very end, because I've had enough times where that was a mistake. Now I make sure that I am actually flipping my costumes around, checking them out, checking how fabric falls, how it fits me, and really doing as many checks as I can throughout the actual creation process and not waiting till the end, because it is a lot easier to fix mistakes when you only have a few stitches to take out compared to an entire costume piece to have to disassemble and reassemble again. You'll also notice I do a lot of pondering and thinking and staring at my outfit because that's also part of my thought processes. Sometimes it takes me time to really think about the construction and how am I going to make something fit, or how am I going to make something get sewn together. For me, sometimes that takes a little bit longer to just think about, but once I get there, then I get it all sorted out. Here you can see I'm doing the same thing. This is now the underside of the hat that's going to be sitting against my head. And one thing I really like about this fabric in particular that you might notice on camera is that it has kind of these lines through it, which is awesome. It is something that I feel like makes it look a little bit more grungy and adds a little bit more texture before I have to add rhinestones or anything else to it. I personally am a fan of texture, so the more texture I can have before I add more texture, the easier my job gets later. So I was very happy with this coincidence. And when I was sewing, I very specifically started both on the top and the bottom part of the hat. I started with sewing the inside ring first because that was the part that really had to fit my head. If I had sewn the outside part first, then I would be at risk of possibly making it not enough fabric or too tight for me to actually finish that middle part. So I really wanted to make sure that I had that inside part ready for my head first, and then the outside was the easier part for me to sew. And I really wanted to make sure I had as clean of a line or fold as I could. I did cut it so I had less fabric to have to deal with, and I would fold it over and then sew it over so then it would lay flat and nice and clean throughout the entire end product. Looking into my bathroom, how intimate. Here's my hat, so you can see, you can kind of see if I go up close some of the stitching. When I was sewing, you probably noticed that I was trying my best to kind of put my hand in the middle of the big circle of the wreath ring. Reason for that was so that I could have a little bit of a bump here, because I didn't want it to be completely flat, otherwise it wouldn't sit properly on my head. I did make it a little bit too shallow, and it should be a tiny bit more deep than I thought it should be, but that's okay. I can make it work anyways with the same plan that I had before. I do not have to reorganize or go with a plan B, so that's awesome. I think I'm gonna have it sit on my head very cute like that. Maybe like that, maybe on the back. No, I like my original plan, I think. Either having it here so that you can see my bangs and my thicker part of my hair coming out. When I usually do my hair, what I tend to do is put my one side of my hair up, and then I like to do a cross, two bobby pins in my hair all the time on the one side, so they kind of go like this on top. So one clip is holding my hair up and out of my face, but the other one coming down but the one coming down holds the clip flat and down so it doesn't loosen in my hair, especially because they're just bobby pins. They're not ones that clip or anything. Also, I like it because I find it's really easy to put a hair flower in. For example, you can kind of see here, here's my hair flower, and I'll often like open it here and I'll try to slide this piece underneath and in between those two bobby pins that I just put in. And then it just kind of sits, and that way I can usually shake my head pretty okay. It does stay really nicely, which is awesome. I'm gonna probably do a similar thing, I'm thinking, for when I do my trash can lid. I'm gonna essentially sew it down like that on both sides. So one here and one here. When I put it down on my head like this, I'll have a bobby pin here that I can attach this one to, and then I can attach one to the one up here as well to hold it down a little bit easier so that I can turn my head. I don't have to worry about holding it all night long. I'm gonna do that, and then once I have it tested and going good and smooth, then I just have to put on my little lid, which I'm just gonna do with some silver ribbon that I have. All right, let's go. And one thing to note, this part that I thought would be so easy was unfortunately a little bit trickier than I was expecting it to be in the beginning, but that's okay. It is done, it is in the past. Now I get to move on and just exist with the hat. And once I had my little ties in for security, next up was making it actually look more like a trash can. So one of the things I did was I had some silver ribbon. So I just decided to use that because it's light, easy. I also sewed the middle down so it just tacked and doesn't get caught on anything. There's my little hat that kind of looks like a little bow. Okay, so I didn't talk about this before, but essentially I went to Michael's and I have an idea. I really like how it's coming along. I think this is gonna be, it's looking super cute so far, but I feel like it's missing something, and especially because my Oscar the Grouch is quite fluffy and voluptuous. Or has quite a bit of detail. I don't want the hat to get lost, and so we were kind of brainstorming what would be cool to add on the rim or on anything on the hat to either make it stand out or make it match and fit in with the rest of the outfit. Essentially what we came up with was the concept of the eyebrow. I bought some nice fluffy yarn, very thick fluffy brown yarn, and I got some gardening rods from Michael's, and I'm gonna experiment with it and see if I can make something couture-esque with it. So I'm gonna do some experimenting with shapes and how that's gonna look, and then I'll sew it on. And for anybody who has not worked with gardening wire, it can be difficult to bend to your will. So I ended up having to experiment a few times with things like pliers and a pencil to help me twist it. Welcome to what was both easy and terrible at the same time because I was working with super glue. Basically, what my intention is I had the wire framing to help keep the shape of the eyebrow, and I took super glue and my little yarn and I just literally twisted the yarn around the wire. There wasn't anything too fancy to it. You can see at one point I do use my pliers to kind of try to sand down the wire a little bit more so it's easier to grip onto and not so smooth. Basically, it's a slow process of me putting on super glue, wrapping it with the yarn, and then me kind of pinching it to make sure that it sticks. But because it's super glue, my fingers did get stuck quite a few times, but in the end it worked out and I'm really happy with the end result. And at the very end, you can see me going in kind of into some of those bigger crevices of the yarn to really reinforce it and to make sure there wasn't any big gaps where the yarn could come loose. Basically, once that was all good, I tested it out on my hat and I was very incredibly happy with it. Okay, doke. Hello everybody, welcome back again. Like a fool, I forgot to film the last little bit of my hat making process. So I will have some photos on the screen for you to check out of how the costume and the full outfit came out. And one thing that I'm really happy about with this hat and this costume in particular is how mindful I was with having to travel with it. Because I was going to Vegas, I knew I wanted it to be easy to travel with. I succeeded in some ways, and in other ways I still have to work on the outfit to make it easier to travel with. But one thing I said was this frame, because it's nice and solid, it makes it much more durable. So I put it in my suitcase in a little box or case, so it has more protection as well. And the eyebrow, I also sewed on and super glued at the same time snaps onto the eyebrow, just on the tips here, and also onto the hat. You can see I sewed them here and here, and so that way it's two things. I can take this out, it travels really nice and easy. I can protect it with its little case, and also it's easy to know where the eyebrow is supposed to go and where the front of the hat is and how it's supposed to sit on my head, all because of these little snaps. I am very happy about this hat. I'm very happy with how this entire costume came out. Ironically, I don't have an act for it yet. I did make this outfit because this year's theme for the Thursday night at Burlesque Hall of Fame was Muppets. So I decided I had to embrace the full theme. Thank you, Margot Mayhem, for the fantastic theme idea. And I'm very excited to see how this continues to grow and eventually become an act, because I've worked too hard for this to not come back out again. And I did mention that I messed up and I forgot to film me making my bra, which you can also see here behind me. Hello. If you want to see me talk a little bit about that process as well and how I made it without going through it step by step, because again I don't have the footage, but I am happy to talk about my process anyways, comment down below, let me know what you think. And I'm also curious if you have any exciting costumes that you're currently working on or you just recently finished that you're very excited for. Please leave your costume suggestions, ideas, what you're working on down below in the comments, and I'm very excited to see what you have. Otherwise, with that, I am Cherry Cheeks, and thank you for watching. Bye.